That's the sneak peek of Saquon Barkley. He will be the full interview dropping tomorrow on the Scoop City podcast, another podcast, Nick, I got to listen to.
It's another one you have to get to your list.
Yeah, Nick Earnshaw across from me. I'm Josh Hennick here in the Ocean Casino Resort Studios on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 on a Monday with Geoff Mosher joining us here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff, welcome back from the weekend. How you doing today?
I'm great, Josh. Thanks for having me. And listen, you know you don't need any other podcast for your Eagles info other than Inside the Birds. We got it all covered. You know that.
Well, cover this for me because Saquon's doing more interviews for the season starts, and he's basically insinuating that he always knew he was going to be leaving the Giants. Do you buy that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we even discussed this either last week or when the stuff came out from Hard Knocks, right? When they didn't reach a long-term agreement last year around this time, and then he wound up settling for that revised one-year deal, that was the writing on the wall. The Giants were not going to want to pay him more than they already offered, especially because last year it was an okay year for Saquon, but it wasn't a breakout blockbuster year by any stretch of the means. And as we had discussed, I know that the Eagles have used this tactic before to sort of play the public relations game where they've told a free agent, you go ahead and test the market and come back to us with what you got. And we'll either match it or say, God bless you for getting a great offer. But sometimes the organization just wants to be able to tell the public, hey, he got a great offer that we couldn't compete with, not really letting the public know that they never even made an offer. You were just told the guy to test the waters and let him take whatever contract was out there. It sticks out in my mind, Josh, that when they won their playoff game, was it against the Vikings 2 years ago before they played the Eagles, right?
Yes, it was the Vikings.
Upset?
Yep.
You can go fact check me on this. I'm pretty sure Saquon Barkley got 9 carries in that game. And then after that, when they played the Eagles, yes, they got blown out, but I'm fairly certain Saquon carried the ball 9 or fewer times and didn't get a whole lot of touches in that game as well. It seemed like the Giants were already starting to try to move away from being a run-heavy, Saquon-heavy team and into a more of a passing game with Daniel Jones, who had a decent year that year, but obviously last year things got messed up when Daniel Jones got hurt. But, you look at what the Giants' plans were, I don't think they ever had an intention of bringing him back.
By the way, you are correct that he had 9 rush attempts in both playoff games. He actually had a total of 11 touches versus the Eagles, 14 touches versus the Vikings. So, but Geoff, you just said something perplexing to me. You just said that they were already trying to phase out his role in their offense. And it's like, why would you want to phase out a guy who is arguably one of the best at his position? Like, you don't have to run the ball with him all the time. You can use him as a receiving weapon. You can use him in a multitude of ways. Like, are the Giants really that against having a running back be one of their best skill players?
Well, I think you have to look at the head coach, Brian Dable, the coordinator, Mike Kafka, the systems that both of those guys come from, Kansas City. Dable was with Buffalo before that. They were starting to open up the offense, and almost every offensive coordinator outside of maybe like Jim Harbaugh or even Greg Roman when he was with the Ravens, most offensive coordinators or head coaches with an offensive mindset want to throw the ball. They want to evolve their offense into an explosive pass game offense. And I'm just the middleman here. I'm just the objective person giving you my viewpoint. Saquon had a great rookie year when the Giants were terrible and had nothing. I think he had over 2,000 combined yards. Then he got hurt, right? Second year was the ACL. I mean, he'd been banged up quite a bit. And if you look at his yards per carry average since the first 2 years, they've gone down considerably. So is he one of the best at his position? Yes. Is the NFL blessed right now with 10 to 12 great running backs? Probably not, right? I mean, to be fair, it's not a great era for unbelievable running backs. I mean, it just isn't. And I probably have a negative tinge to me, and I'm not trying to be that way. I've always sort of looked at the Saquon signing with the Eagles somewhat skeptically because it's pretty out of character for Howie to spend big free agent money on a running back. But if you do look at the trajectory of Saquon Barkley's career, it started off first 2 years like a lot of running backs, really good, but came back to earth, both statistically and obviously for health reasons as the years have gone on. And like I said, most offenses want to graduate from running the ball a lot to throwing the ball a lot.
Hey, Geoff, I want to stick with Saquon Barkley here and just kind of talk about how he's going to be involved in the offense this year. We've seen the Eagles not really utilize running backs in the passing game a ton over the past couple of years, or in a while, to say the least.
Right.
How much do you think they're going to get Saquon involved in the passing game? Maybe line him up in the slot at times, throwing him out of the backfield screens and things of that nature. Do you think they're going to use him in that way?
You would think, based on what we saw at OTAs and what we know he can do as an athlete, as a ball catcher, yeah, you would think so. But to be honest with you, we had this sort of discussion about DeAndre Swift last year, right? And ironically, DeAndre Swift had the most carries and rushing yards of his career and the fewest receptions and receiving yards of his career. Now, you bring Kellen Moore into the equation. Kellen Moore had Tony Pollard doing great things, catching the ball 2 years ago. He also had last year Austin Eckler at times being able to catch the ball. So it is a part of the offense, but, I don't see Saquon Barkley the way like a Brian Westbrook type of player. I don't see him lining up and running routes really well. I think he's got good hands and can catch the ball leaking out of the backfield. But one of the fundamental issues they'll have on this, Nick, is that Saquon Barkley's pass pro is not great. It's okay. Not great. There was a myth when they signed him that this was going to be huge for their pass pro game because Saquon Barkley's a big guy, and I think people protect him. But both Adam and I have spoke to a lot of different people on this, and people who watch tape, people who've coached him in other places, and they've said, great guy, love him, smart guy. It's nothing like that. It's just he's not the best pass protector. So if you're going to put him out there to catch a lot of balls on third down, you're also going to have to then not telegraph everything. You're going to have to keep him in sometimes. But right now, Kenny Gainwell has been the guy for them that's been the better guy at blitz pickup and pass protection. So if you want to put him on the field more to catch passes, okay, but then you're taking away maybe a potential blocker in the blitz game and inviting a blitz, which is an area they struggled at last year.
Geoff Mosher joining us from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Joining us here on the Sports Bash, he's Nick Earnshaw. I'm Josh Hedek, filling in for Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. You mentioned the offense, Geoff, and I want to touch on that again because you and I talked about this a little bit on Wednesday's show, and that is, Kellen Moore is the guy in charge now, and there's all kinds of articles that have been coming out, all kinds of interviews, whether it's Diana Rossini, what she said in The Athletic, whether it's Marcus Hayes in the Philadelphia Inquirer, whether it is 100 different people have talked about this. But I want to get to your reporting, Geoff, because you and Adam had this months ago about the whole dynamic of Nick Sirianni basically seceding the play calling. This is not new news. So why do you think this topic is, ramping up the way it is when this is something that you and Adam reported about months ago?
So I'm sorry, you're talking about the Saquon Barkley element of it? Why is that now all of a sudden?
No, the Kellen Moore being in charge of the offense and Sirianni seceding the play calling. This is something that you and Adam talked about months ago, but now all of a sudden, the last several days, it's become a new. It's almost like people are having like an epiphany about it.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the summer cycle, right, where the national media. You get closer to training camp and you want to seize upon the bigger storylines going into camp. And so you revisit angles that have already been touched on months prior, but because you're national media, it gets a little extra buzz to it, whether it's what you just, the Scoop City podcast or something Adam Schefter might say. But yeah, you're right. It is not new news that this will be Kellen Moore's offense, and Nick Sirianni has continued to say, hey, look, it's going to be his offense, and some of the things we did do well will be incorporated into it, I'm sure. But yeah, it's got to be a new offense because the head coach already admitted that the last one was stale. So I mean, when the head coach comes out and says it, it makes it easier for the reporters to say, see, we're not crazy.
Right.
The head coach says it too.
Well, I mean, the coach said it. Jason Kelsey said it. Lane Johnson said it. Jalen Hurts implied it. Darius Slay implied it. Brandon Graham.
Right.
Like, everyone has said it implied this. Like, why are we acting like this is like, I don't know, Isaac Newton discovering gravity?
The same thing with the defense, Josh, because I know maybe it was only a week or two ago, Brandon Graham in an interview talked about on the defensive coaching staff. Someone said, what happened last year? Why was the defense so awful over the second half? He said, well, we didn't have the coaches putting players in the right spot, and it made all these headlines. And I'm like, why is this making headlines? This was the most obvious thing any Eagles fan or observer could tell you. And then on top of that, of course, we had it well in-depth reported, all the sort of power struggle there on defense and Sean Desai and the players having issues with it. And then going to Matt Patricia trying to run a scheme that isn't his. I mean, it's all chronicled, not just on Inside the Birds, but yes, definitely on Inside the Birds.
Really quick, here's that Brandon Graham audio you're referring to, Jeff.
I didn't think we had all the right coaches in the proper spots that could help us, whatever Desai's message was, because it was just a bunch of miscommunication. That's all. That's what I would just say. It was just miscommunication that I know Howie regretted after the season.
Go ahead, Jeff. Follow up on that.
Yeah, I love Brandon, so I'm not making fun of him, but that is what's the term? No est Sherlock. Oh man. Like, yes, you definitely had coaches not in the right. You had a coach, Matt Patricia, running a scheme, a Fangio scheme, when he had he had zero education in that scheme. I mean, I know he's a defensive coach and he's a smart guy and whatever, astrophysicist or whatever he is, but I mean, come on, like it was even before that, you had miscommunication because you had 4 different secondary coaches, and the Eagles did not know how to defend a bunch formation. Guys wide open. It's just bad.
Jeff, I want to stay with the defense here a little bit, and I want to talk about the linebacking situation, specifically Nakobe Dean. Heading into this season, we know he's been injured a little bit, banged up, really hasn't gotten off to a great NFL start. Tell me how Vic Fangio views him heading into this season. How are the Eagles looking to utilize him this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vic Fangio, I can't tell you how he views him until we see how he deploys him on the practice field. What I can tell you is the Eagles, having invested a 3rd-round pick in him, want to see this thing work out, but they've also given themselves options in case it doesn't work out. That's why you're seeing a guy like Zach Bond getting some run, some tests, even though he's never really played inside linebacker. They think he may have the capability to do it. That's why Devin White was signed. That's why Oren Burks was signed as a veteran backup who's played, just played last year or two for the NFC champion 49ers. So they've given themselves options because the concern with Nakobe is his ability to stay healthy. He's been injured here in his first full year starting. He got banged up twice, 2 foot injuries, and they were major. And, we reported this on Inside the Birds, even though when they drafted him, even though he I think he did not miss a game at Georgia, there were concerns about his durability because of his size and just some of the little nagging things that they had heard about him, a foot here, an elbow here, a toe here, things like that, enough that's why he was a 3rd-round pick. So, Adam and I had a little fun on the podcast that came out today. Like, we were trying to handicap who's going to start inside linebacker for the Eagles for the season opener. And I think we put, Devin White at a -140 just based on the contract alone and the experience. We put Nakobe at -120 and Zach Bond at maybe a +225.
Yeah, it's funny though.
There's some good money there on a dark. If Zach Bond's good, there's some good dark horse money on that.
I like that.
I mean, it's good value.
Lot,
I won't deny that. I want to know though, because Jeff, you mentioned you guys reporting on the pod about how this is not the first time Howie has gone into an offseason with like an underwhelming linebacking situation and revamped it. We saw this for 2022. We saw this for 2017. Like this is the Howie. Hey, this is one of my go-to moves. This is almost like the same as like, a basketball player having a spin move in his back pocket. Like this is the Howie move, right? This is his, hey, last year it didn't work. Let me just retool the linebackers based on what the coach says.
Yeah, and that's why I think there's more optionality here with, signing Devin White and Oren Burks, Ben Van Sumeren, who they put some time and effort into developing last year, trying Zach Bond there. You might even see, we'll see, because the big question mark, we'll see how they use Nolan Smith. Does he continue to get a couple of looks at that off-ball linebacker position like he did last spring and a little bit during the season? But the point I was making is how Howie reacts when he knows going into training camp that there are positions that lack depth. Last year, he knew that he went into camp with Nakobe Dean, who never started yet, right? And Nick Morrow replacing Marcus Epps and who's the other guy who went to Arizona? I can't remember his name right now. Marcus Epps and the other starting linebacker from the Super Bowl year. Help me out. I'm getting old.
Oh, I know it's like Kazir White. Kazir White. Yeah, Kazir White.
Kazir White. Right. So my point was, he knew going into the training camp last year that Nick Morrow, Nakobe Dean, and not much depth behind it may not be the answer. So as soon as Nakobe Dean stubbed his toe, he signed Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack. Right. Not two random guys, like two guys who started a lot of NFL games. And Zach Cunningham wound up being a guy that they immediately looked at as a starting linebacker for them. It's almost as if Howie already had it in his mind going into camp that, give me like a week here, let me see what I got. He didn't make that move because Nakobe Dean bruised his ankle one day in a practice. He made that move because he saw what he had at the inside linebacker position and was already thinking about upgrading it going into camp, and then pulled the trigger as soon as he had a reason to. So I would apply that thinking now to safety and to number 3 wide receiver / slot receiver, and maybe even defensive tackle where they don't have much depth, where Howie probably has some names in mind here, and he's going to go to camp and he's going to let some competition play out. But, especially at safety where they're really, really short on bodies, let see what happens if Reed Blankenship stubs his toe, right? You might find 3 safeties in here the next day, just like they did last year at linebacker.
Justin Simmons is out there still.
Yeah, I think that's the popular name, but like I said, Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack were 1-year guys who were not going to get guaranteed contracts, right? You're probably looking more along the lines of that.
Geoff, before I let you go, I wanted to follow up, speaking of the defense, on something that we talked about with Adam on Friday's Football on 4, which was about the defensive tackles. Nick and I are going to joust a little bit later about who the top Philly athletes who are 25 and younger are. And, to me, 2 guys who are on the list have to be talked about are Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. But a lot of that conversation is about their potential, not about what they actually have done. So, talk to them about the interior D-line, because you are having to replace a staple, which is Fletcher Cox, in 2 years after also Javon Hargrave leaving. And now you got not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 very young players, all at the D-tackle starting in reserve spots.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard Adam's fact in their podcast this morning, but this, it was mind-blowing. My eyes didn't fall out, but my ears almost fell off when I was hearing Adam say it. But the Eagles are the only NFL team not to have a vested veteran at defensive tackle. Yep. The Eagles, of all teams, that has put the most, right? Like I could believe that about another organization, but not the Eagles. But yeah, I mean, that just shows you how razor thin they are, unless of course some of their young guys like Moro Ajomo or a Gabe Hall, who they got as a rookie free agent this year, really step up and turn into something. But that's one of those positions that I think that by the time we get to the season, there'll be a veteran name there, but we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I think to your point, Josh, I feel more comfortable about putting Jalen Carter on that list. I know he faded a little bit down the stretch, but there were just times where he played with such violence, controlled violence and such athleticism that the person who lined up across from him just had no shot, right? I mean, we just saw him just hand smacked guards to the ground. That's just, you don't see that every day. Jordan Davis, to me, I think the concept of what Jordan Davis can be is more tantalizing than what he might actually wind up being. First and foremost, he has to stay in shape. He is right now, as far as his weight down. He has to keep his weight down, and then he has to get in football shape, meaning he's got to be able to play a significant stretch of the game. He's always going to rotate. That's fine. Defensive linemen do that. But he's got to be able to play steady rotations and not lose his technique as the game goes on because he gets tired and exhausted. It's amazing how blockable a 360-pound guy is when he is tired because he just plays high and gets pushed out of the way. So that's a big challenge for him. And then once, Josh, you get past that, then you've got to see, all right, well, you're a top 15 pick. I mean, they didn't draft you just to play the run. Eventually, you got to show that maybe you can push the pocket a little bit, become a part of the pass rush. So I feel like there's a lot of hurdles to clear for Jordan Davis to really become what the team envisioned when they drafted him and they saw that athleticism that he showed at the combine and everything. That to me is a little bit further away from Jalen Carter, who I just think as long as he keeps his head on straight, takes the coaching, and goes out there and is conditioned to play more snaps, he's going to be a great player.
He's Geoff Mosher. Follow him on Twitter X at Geoff P. Mosher on Twitter, because we all know the P stands for Philadelphia. Geoff P. Mosher on the Twitter X platform. And check out the latest edition of the Inside the Podcast. Like and subscribe. Download wherever you get your podcast. And Jeff will be back on Wednesday when Mike Gill is back behind the mic here on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, great stuff today. Appreciate you jumping on.
Thanks, Josh. That's actually the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me about the P standing for in my name, so I appreciate it. Take care, guys.
See you later. Geoff Mosher here on 97.3 ESPN.